This is a video going out to all the participants in the Leadership Academy that we've been experiencing for the last, in some places, as long as 8 or 9 months, and a couple of places less time than that. We're all pretty much on the same track in terms of where we wanted to take this discussion. And I want to do this to sort of bring some summary to this and some next step implications. We've had a little bit of interference in the fall and now in early winter with two hurricanes and now the winter storm. We've had some interruptions in time that we could have spent together. Hopefully, after the first of the year, we can reconvene and get back on the track that I had intended for you from the beginning. This is a document that I want you to begin to live with and incorporate. Let me go back and share my desktop with you. I think I should have done that before I pulled the document up. Apologize for that. Now, the document that I was just referring to is Building Capacity Template. The goals on the left side of this is like a strategic plan, and I've indicated to you in our meetings this could be a 3 to 5 year plan for a roadmap or direction in building capacity in your individual schools and or building capacity in your school systems. So the things on the left, the goals that I've indicated for you, are the primary targets that we've addressed in our sessions. Certainly spent a lot of time on individual efficacy, collective efficacy, and school culture as a foundation for what we're talking about in terms of what it takes to build growth and development in a system or take the system to the next level. We shared with you Hattie's research on the 250 factors that impact student achievement, where he rank ordered those. And at the top of the list was collective teacher efficacy at an effect size of 1.57, keeping in mind that 0.8 is a significant effect size, so this is almost double. So out of 250 possible contributors to student growth, teacher collective efficacy is at the top of the list. So that's sort of validated what we've been talking about. What I want you to do with this, and what I've asked most of you to do, is to, in teams at your schools, or even we've done some teaming in system wide, is to think about how we could achieve these goals. First, setting a goal with key indicators and evidences of what we want to achieve with that, but revolve around at least these 5 areas. And you certainly can add some areas to this if you think that will be beneficial to your school or your school system. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these again and give you some ideas I have. I don't want to say too much because this is your working plan. This is something you see from reflecting on your school or reflecting in your teams about your school or your school system. So I don't want to pad this with what I think needs to be done necessarily. I want you to think through that, examine some of the literature of your own, think about the things we've talked about and what you've been shown, things that you've got in your Google files that you might can pull back up and look at. In terms of self-efficacy, we began a discussion early in our session with a value-added model. And if you look at the concept here is creating a learning culture, whether it be site-based or system-based, where there is an individual and collective level of learning culture within that organization. And so the boxes with the red in it, we talked about what these were. These are our developmental needs of all the individuals in our system or in our organization. So to build self-efficacy, you must have strong dispositions. building professional experiences that allow people to grow and develop. We talked about the difference between professional experiences and professional development. It's not an event where we gather together and do things. It's an experience that leads to growth and development. We talked specifically about how some of those things could be done. Putting structures in place, such as PLCs, or other common times or other ways for people to get together, will also emphasize that learning structures are a mindset as much as they are a process. So the structure is one where we find time, create time, make sure we have an opportunity to collaborate with others. Shared decision-making opportunities, giving teachers an opportunity to be part of this decision-making process. And we're going to look at shortly of the 6 enablers for collective teacher efficacy, and that is certainly a big piece and one of those 6 indicators. And then developing assessment skills where we reflect and understand why we got what we got out of our performance. If you remember, we talked about these are 5 contributors to a learning culture, regardless of what the organization is, but since we're specifically talking about your school or your school system, these can be measured for individual indicators or collective indicators. From that, those measures, we look at growth plans individually and collectively. We create action research opportunities in the classroom or across the building or across the system. And we would provide empowerment and efficacy training for all those individuals there. Those are just suggestions in a way to add value and add capacity to the school as you move forward. So this could be, this should be a big part of your plan. There might be some additional pieces there, but this would relate to the idea of how do you build self-efficacy and collective efficacy in your organization. We also gave you some terminology for meeting these developmental needs. What is a disposition? What would you be measuring in a disposition? What could you be observing to determine the level of disposition? What experiences would be beneficial? And there's several slides here from professional experiences all the way to individuals or non-academic. This is just to give you some thought about building some action to address each of these contributors to self-efficacy. So you can go back to these notes. I will load for you all of these again, but all these are in your Google Docs at some point throughout our sessions. So there are cliff notes on how to work with or how to deal with those contributors to self-efficacy. Collective efficacy is very similar, since collectively we did say we could measure those 6 components. Here's the Hattie. You have this in your documents as well. This is the 250 contributors to student growth in rank order, and see the number 1 contributors collective teacher efficacy at double a significant amount. So that just shows, and there's about 800, I think 8 million data points in that research, which makes it really valid. So the collective efficacy piece then would be, in my opinion, to look at the cultural pyramid that we spent considerable time on. And we know that the theory here, or the concept here, is that the 3 foundational blocks of common language, routines or expectations, and relationships give us a foundation for which we can develop the philosophical beliefs of capacity and continuous improvement. And all these are still supported by the developmental needs and ways to address developmental needs these. We just went over 5 of those. This model includes social cognitive theory as well, which means we develop skills in finding people who have best practices, observing those best practices, practicing the best practices, and have a passion to want to achieve or perform at that same level. So from a collective standpoint, part of my idea would be, if I were doing this, and I have done this with others, is to develop these foundational blocks. What is the common language for this school? What are the expectations and routines? What are the relationships that you want? And we have given you then some cliff notes on what the verbiage would be in terms of a common language. This is not all inclusive. You could add to this, what are our expectations and routines? And how do we build relationships in the building between students and students, students and teachers, teachers and teachers, and teachers and leaders, and all of this, and parents? So there are some strong implications there. This also addresses the cultural development in addition to the collective efficacy piece. Also have given you from Houlihan's work. Not sure that we've covered this in every group yet, but will before we finish our time together. This concept is that build on the fact that we know that collective teacher efficacy is the biggest factor impacting student achievement. What conditions within our building, within our organization, are needed to enhance the level of collective efficacy? Number one in her work is advanced teacher influence. So this connects with one of our 5 goals, which is enhancing or improving teacher leadership. Advanced teacher leadership influence, and the key word here is advanced, is teachers assuming roles and accepting responsibilities for helping the system or school or system get better at what they do. And they do that with having some power to help drive some decisions. And there's mastery experiences built into that teacher influence, as these are teachers who are willing and take the responsibility and the opportunity to make a difference in all the classrooms, not just their own. And so it becomes a network of social persuasion as these teachers work with each other. And we'll look at some of this in our teacher leadership development, the competencies and behaviors that we expect. Research also says for collective efficacy, we need goal consensus, meaning we all accept and share and believe in what we're trying to achieve. And we're going to establish these, and I know you're going to establish most of this around student results, and that's important. But just as important as this, some of this goal consensus is building this culture for learning and building this culture for sharing in the capacity building opportunities or contributing to the collective efficacy level. So as you think about this and you develop actions and evidences for this particular goal, don't forget, in addition to student growth, you want the individual teacher growth or leadership growth, and the student growth will come more strongly and go further with that opportunity to build that. That's been sort of the foundation of what we've talked about since we've been together. Thirdly, teachers' knowledge about one another's work. So through BLCs or meetings or sharing or best practices, we know something about ourselves. We know something about each other that helps us determine and identify who we need to go to when we need to collaborate or need some assistance. And from that social cognitive aspect, we know where the desired performance is and what it looks like and what we can go look at. So until we know about each other and each other's work and what does work, what might not work, we cannot collaborate on making changes or making differences to the learning level of the students themselves. There must be a cohesive staff, meaning that we must understand this is all from the best interest of kids. It's all in the best interest of the growth and development of the teachers. When they can agree on fundamental and organizational issues. And there's a consensus building opportunity here, trust building factors. Each of these enablers have ingrained within them or embedded within multiple factors that help create that. So a cohesive staff is built on trust and sharing and value and goals that are consistent and value of goals that are shared and believed in. Not necessarily 100% agreement, but at least reaching a consensus on what's best for the staff and the teaching opportunities, what's best for the kids and the learning opportunities. Then responsiveness of leadership. Leaderships in the building or leadership across the system must provide learning opportunities. That's in the school, it's out of the school, it's professional, it's personal. Supporting the teachers and modeling that support to have a greater belief in collective ability. And the leader must be really vested in being aware of all situations and implications and outcomes. And there's a sixth one, the last one of this particular research is systems of intervention for student learning, but also intervention for faculty development or teacher development, so that there's a system in place to make sure we're monitoring the growth and development of the ability of the teachers and the collective ability of the group as we move along. Fostering this whole concept of these six enablers is by strengthening collective teacher efficacy. Teachers will develop the resolve and accept that responsibility to perform, allowing them to persist against challenges and therefore realize increased student results. So it's a team effort, not an individual effort. A team effort far beyond where most of our schools are right now. There must be opportunities for meaningful collaboration, empowering teachers or giving them some opportunities to make decisions, goals with high expectations, and interpreting results and providing feedback for what we see in them. So this is an important piece. It's this concept of six things that can change the level of collective efficacy is also enhanced or sustained by these particular principles or beliefs. We'll continue to talk as we're typed together and as I begin to help you think through your template and building capacity. We will continue to talk about these six factors and a little more research that's available there that gives us some growth and strength. So we've come down through self-efficacy, collective efficacy, and school culture. School culture built around, and my expectation would be some emphasis or some connection to the cultural pyramid. Enhancing teacher leadership, which is embedded within school culture and collective efficacy, obviously. We've given you some materials on the 4 constructs for developing true teacher leadership. Those 4 constructs include developing the self, being able or skilled in locating and driving initiatives that are matched to the needs assessment, skills in leading others, and skills in coaching others. The premise here is if you're looking for people in your building to be teacher leaders or leaders of teachers, as we talked about in our sessions together, these are things that you would look at within the individual. That are they driving themselves to develop themselves as a person and as a professional? So are they growing, developing, learning, getting higher skill levels? Are they ones who are looking for research-based initiatives as they, not just because they're attractive, but because they're matched to what the needs call for? Do they have the skills to get out front and lead others? And do they have the skills to coach others? And there's a difference between coaching and leading. If you go through these sets of notes, there are competencies built in for each of those 4 areas. Competencies for developing self is understanding, being self-aware, being able to manage yourself, social awareness of those around you, and relationship management. Within each of those competencies are behaviors that we might ask then, what if self-awareness is a competency, what are we looking for? How do we judge that? How do we know if it's in place? And these are behaviors that we look for. So if we're looking for teacher leaders, then these are behaviors that we start to observe and understand and talk about. If we're wanting to develop teacher leaders, then these are behaviors that we teach and say, here's what we think is important. This is what research has said is important for developing your competency and improving yourself. And your self-management behaviors, which is the second competency, social awareness behaviors, which is the third competency, and relationship management behaviors, which is the last. So you have a pretty extensive list of what you actually see in someone who is your teacher leader, who might want to be a teacher leader, or who you might want to make a teacher leader. You can teach them these things. The second pillar is the competencies for locating and driving initiatives. We have to have people who can understand and can be visionary, who can plan for change, who can act on that plan based on locating initiatives and being able to reflect on that. And we have behaviors under each of those particular competencies that gives you indicators of what that looks like. So your spreadsheet on building compassion could be rather extensive as you start looking at if you use this as part of your way to achieve the goal of higher teacher leadership. The competencies for leading teams are broken down into categories. What it means to run a functioning team, what it means for measuring impact, professional development, and meeting design, and facilitating that professional development. So then we have competencies in each of those particular areas, and then there are behaviors under each of those as well. So this is a jump start for you to be thinking about your actions and your indicators. Coaching others, foundational skills, way of being, and a coaching cycle. So we have 3 categories of competencies with sub-competencies in each of those areas. Coaching relationships, being able to be a good listener, powerful questioning skills, coaching styles. So we have to dig into these behaviors and think about the individual that we want to be our teacher leader, or who may already be teacher leaders, and what we expect for them to improve their own opportunities as a teacher leader. So as you're building your competency template, there's certainly a lot here that you could use. You'll have opportunities to go back to this as well. It's in your Google documents as well. Then the last goal of improving learning and improving the learning culture is built around what we know about how adults learn. In order for us to lead learning of the adults, we have to understand that adults learn in different ways. This literature talks about the 4 different types of adult learners. Instrumental learner, who has to have all the rules, has to have all the templates and the agendas and the layouts and the consequences, and constantly monitored. Second type is a social learner, who focuses on working with others, who grow and learn and develop as they work in teams, which is fine. We need a little bit of each of these learners in our faculties in order to get a mix of what it takes to enhance the overall learning culture. Then a self-authoring learner looks at themselves, reflects on that, and determines what they need to become more of a learner, and what skills they need to develop to be better at their job. And then a self-transforming learner has that ability to interconnect with what they're capable of doing, with what needs to be done, and they're never satisfied with their level of performance. They're continually trying to find different ways. What we've given you in this literature is a list of supports for each type of learner. So if you've got an instrumental learner in your building, here's what they need. This is your behaviors or your competencies in dealing with instrumental learners. Here's what you can do to challenge that instrumental learner, to try to move them more toward at least that self-authoring learner. And then we go through each of the types of socializing learner supports: the challenge for social learner, the self-authoring learner, the challenges for that group, and then the self-transforming learner. And if you've got this group of people, or a group of people in this particular learning category, learner category, then this is some things that you can do to enhance that. And then challenges for a self-transforming learner. These are also some additional indicators for growth in this learning cultural development: effective teaming, providing leadership roles, engaging the adults in collegial inquiry, and mentoring adults who, especially those instrumental type learners. So this is from Drago Severson's work. You can certainly pick other areas or other research to found your plan on. So you have adequate, if not overly adequate, amount of information to look at different actions that would be beneficial to your school or your school system. The key is going to be the indicators and evidences that you want to measure or judge, then the resources that are needed to get this done, and in what timeline could you do some of these things. We'll certainly consider adding another category here, and that would be desired outcomes in terms of what our key indicators are. But until we get those identified, I think it'd be best if we just stay with getting this part developed, then start talking about particular measures, because everybody's will be a little bit different. Didn't hope this doesn't overwhelm you any at all. It's just more of a review of everything we've done thus far. It's a direction that we want to take moving forward, and to the level, whatever level you want to take that. Certainly, I have no control or recourse for making this happen. I just think that the discussions and the conversations that will occur around this are significant. We know that capacity is our goal, and we all want to take our schools or our systems to the next level, regardless of where we are. And so, while this seems sometimes maybe highly theoretical, uh, it becomes practical when you start identifying actions. It becomes valuable when you start identifying key indicators, and then can set some measures for whether or not those indicators are met. So as we go into the holiday and then turn to the new year, this will be the focus of our continued conversations. And I suggest you find you a team of people that will take this as seriously as you do. Start working together in terms of conversations and times to meet. Keep good notes on what you talk about. This is a evolving process, and I think really believe you could take this and keep it on file, review it periodically, and make some real changes in what's going on with your people that you're leading, and what's going on with people that you work with, especially what goes on with the level of student learning. So I look forward to seeing you again. I hope you have a great holiday. Look forward to the new year, and some things that can take place. And I'm excited to hear about what you think and how you can incorporate some of these concepts. certainly I'm here and open for questions, and certainly open to questions when we get back together. And I really do feel excited about the opportunities to learn from this. And as we create a network, we're in about 12 school systems right now in North Carolina and South Carolina, with varying needs and different levels of capacity. And so I think that once these are created, we can create networks by which we can grow and develop a bigger and larger learning community and be able to share, and then especially find some common needs that we might be able to go visit, we might be able to see models of best practices. The sky's the limit on this if we buy into this process, and certainly the literature and the research is supporting that this is the way to change our outcomes. Thank you.